Hi, welcome. In this video, this is part three of my response breakdown series by way of, again, Bill Church and Ivan uh, Balbanov. And here in part three, again, going through, again, talking about, the, upside down world as it relates to dog training. And the whole thing about appearances, about this, again, I talk about the counterfeit picture that is set in motion by many who approach training as a learning-based exercise versus a intervention. And even again, in terms of this discussion within systems, okay? So these trainers talk about their systems and how they define, how they respond, how they see things. Understand is a type of conversation. Again, once you understand what's going on. It's the same thing with the overall collateral damage, okay, that happens in terms of relationships with humans, relationships with dogs, blame shifting, pride and ego. It's just like a really bad cocktail mix that affects everything. And so again, I talk about the issue about clarity, talking about being able to be intentional, okay, when it comes to outcomes, when it comes to even getting the right information, because understand that so often it's like so many dog owners, even if they want to be successful, they don't even have a chance for the starting gate based on the fact they're not even getting the right information to begin with, based on their role in the relationship, based on what training represents. So that's a really kind of a sad state that the dog training world is in. And you see this whole thing with, again, these trainers going on these podcasts and not a whisper as to what the real issue is, because understand it's totally corrupted. They don't even know how to respond. Again, I have that question of the century I called up on my top and center on the Facebook page, which goes right to the heart of the matter. And it just sets up this effect here as to what's happening. So understand the dog training world is totally disconnected from reality. And this is just about appearances. It's just about trying to be popular. But you look at just the blame shifting. You look at dogs that are they're being sacrificed on the altar of this ideology. And doesn't matter if it's through balance training, purely positive, play based, all of it. I get into the actual criteria of what training is. And so, this is the problem. You get into this, but you see all these trainers. You see, I get talk about controversy after controversy after controversy, all the infighting. You see, within the infighting itself, this back and forth between these trainers, they're still staying within their ideological comfort zone, which means that, they're all their foundation is all the same. So to try to call each other out, it's this exercise in futility. Okay, it's just this rigged game that's going on. So, balanced archers are playing both sides of the fence. So this is why again you have all these conversations, but here's a 4 hour conversation about what exactly, So again, this is where again I'm using this as a kind of a framework to fill in the gaps here to add to the conversation, so people understand what's happening in the dog training world. And, so when trainers like Ivan put out a video a while back saying, challenging, hey, what's your response? He's talking about, you know, pretending to have a real conversation about the real problem in the dog training world from his perspective. Well, guess what? I respond to it and it generated a copyright strike. I mean, it's ridiculous. So that tells you right there. If you can't even, have a real conversation without going to that level, well, it just shows it's just a game. That's all it is. These trainers are in defensive mode, and they're okay. They go on these other podcasts just to play that game. So let's play some more of this as we go through. Again, we're just into the beginnings part of this lengthy back and forth. So I will jump it ahead here at some point, but let's see what else has to be is being said here.
Retrieves and using signals, what typically everybody calls markers, we call signals. That was a video that I did, and so like when I kind of introduced that whole idea, probably was, who knows, maybe a couple of years before that video. Then it took so long for everybody to kind of catch up on it and get the idea that has some value. It was like, why bother with this? Like, what's the big deal?
So here he's talking about like catching up, right? Putting out information, catching up. But the question should be, well, catching up to what exactly? Like what's, what is truth, right? What is the problem here? What is, and this is where I go into the asking the big question of what is training? And one of those questions is why is it that some dog owners are successful while others fail using the exact same approach, the exact same devices, the exact same idea, things like what's going on here, and how do you even define success? I talk about that. The problem here is when trainers are focused on appearances, the way I talk about within again the framework of response, there's your problem because the criteria itself is not reconciled. Not number one, is not reconciled properly, but the picture problem. Okay, the assumptions that are being made at that level. So, but when you get into approaching training the right way, you get into this whole thing. I talk about a intentional interaction based approach, right? That again reconciles, brings that criteria in properly to be able to discern, right, both the current state of the relationship, because I understand it's about certain things I talk about intent, right? It's about dog understanding intent in terms of those interactions themselves. Speaking, I talk about the right language, right? So it brings it into a power, does bring it into a power play level. So this whole thing about conflict is going to, right? Challenge is going to be part of that within the parameters of what defines a process. Based again, have to layer this up, that you're dealing with a relationship problem to begin with. Okay, understand? So the whole thing about at the social level, it's no different than being a parent. Here's the problem. It's about these trainers are disconnected from certain points of the relationship that way to actually put things in the proper context. Like because their whole approach is superficial itself, how they're jumping in. They're not making certain connections. They're not establishing those at all. That okay, I got a relationship problem here. Okay, let's start there. Right? That's not happening. These trainers. So they even define how much say control a individual's dog is holding, to even sort that out is problematic, right? Because this is where you have a moment where control is being expressed a certain way. Say you have an aggressive dog. I always tell people like things are when you hit to a certain point, things are a lot worse than what you even think they are. Okay, based again on appearances, based again on when certain things are playing out a certain way. You see certain moments you're seeing it, but you would see it more clearly if you're connected. Like this is where you get a dog on a leash and you start to engage the way I talk about, you're gonna get blindsided at all that way. You're gonna get the right information, right? But off leash, and don't get me wrong, it is about getting dogs off leash. It is part of the relationship that way, but it's about bringing it together in such a way that I have clarity. Okay, I know, and so think of it like a parent-child type of dynamic. When you have certain conversations with a child, where your role is defined properly, parental influence is part of it. A demand's put on the child. You're gonna have clarity. Okay, you're gonna see those, and then you start to connect dots. Say, okay, hold on here a second. I'm getting information from, say, the school, from other individuals my child's interacting with, from their peers, from other kids they're not getting like you'll see it all, right? The clarity that way, even in terms of how you're interacting, your role itself. But see, I understand the dog training world, that's not happening. Okay. It's totally disconnected that way because these trainers don't line things up that way, right? It's all appearance, a lot is just appearance based. So here I haven't talked about like markers. Well, I say the question, well, what are you marking? It's a whole thing about at a response level, right? This even the word behavior is misapplied in the dog training world. Oftentimes, all you're seeing these dogs responding, and trainers are attaching that word behavior on a response that oftentimes is just superficial, and they're trying to gin up, certain appearances a certain way. They're trying to elevate appearances a certain way to try to get you to buy into it. To say, well, you can trust that. You can trust that response. You can trust that picture. And then well, based on what exactly? Okay, like what? Like like how you actually formulating your assessment based on a certain responses that number one is they, you didn't even start, you didn't even apply the right criteria to begin with. Now you got a picture taking shape that you're adding certain words in the mix there to try to, market it a certain way to try to ask, okay, trust it. Well, trust what? See, that's the problem here. Understand that all these trainers do that at a certain level because they're not approaching training at the beginning for what it is. I mean, see, understand this is your problem. So the whole breakdown, when I do a breakdown video, I start talking, I mean, I just start to deconstruct all of it because it's and I always default back to what training is because it's your starting point. If your starting point isn't right, then forget it. This is why some of these trainers like Miracle Canine, their big problem with, when I went on thing was like, well, Dale, why didn't you watch like the whole 30 minutes or 40 minutes of their interaction, their video? I don't have to. Okay. I mean, I'll go if I go 30 seconds in, if the criteria isn't reconciled through how you're interacting the way, then forget it. Okay. It isn't going to happen through the rest of it. I mean, and that's the good thing about, understanding what a process is that you have criteria that's specific to truly know how things align. That's it. I mean, but see, these trainers, they don't think that way. They just like, oh, why didn't you watch my whole? And it's because they're so entrenched in this ideology that they can't apply some of them they can't apply critical thinking to deconstruct the way I'm talking about because they've already like the blame shifting has become normalized and they're not even thinking they're totally thinking a certain way that's not right. It's totally sideways anyway. So that's the problem here. And certain things can look and so even look a certain way, even the issue about success, right? Does relationship change happen? Even absolutely. I never deny that. It isn't about that way, right? It's about being intentional with understanding, you know, how it's happening. And then when it doesn't happen, it's like having that formula, right? You're not approaching it going through a sequence that way, right? So this is the problem in the dog training world. So here you talk about, I talk about markers. Forget it. Okay. It's not about response that way.
Then we did with canine training systems, the training without conflict, clear communication video, which was about that. But even before that, I was like late 90s where I did the advanced shoots.
Again, training without conflict. There's conflict, okay? But it's not about, this whole thing about it's about context. Just think about being a parent. When your child's become selfish, there's conflict. There's already conflict. Okay. There's gonna be conflict by way of reconciling your role properly. Okay. When you transition into and then you bring in parental influence in, it's a power play. There's conflict. So anyone who says there isn't conflict, there's the red flag right away. It isn't gonna line up. Okay. There's conflict, but it's about, understanding it's not about conflict in a way which is just meant to be abusive or over the top. That's not what I'm talking about. Okay, it's about roles. Okay, it's about relationship. Okay, it's about the issue about at the social level. Okay, it's about control. Right, those things all have to be reconciled. So it's going to be, but it's a type of conflict which your dog comes into agreement with. Okay, their role. Okay, the agreeableness. Okay, it makes sense to the dog. It's not the dog understands that you still have their best interest at heart. See that you have to get beyond things here. Like people have to understand the whole thing about relationship through at the social level with dogs. Okay, that's the problem. People get they get kind of they get tripped up on certain on appearances, on certain reactions of dogs, on certain things going on because they're already tripped up at the appearance-based level. Okay, understand they're already compromised, and a lot of trainers are too, so they can't even reconcile reactions properly by way of relationship. Okay, because they're already tripped up through their ideology. See, that's the problem here, and they can't get past it. And then this is where dogs get destroyed and all the blame shifting, right, and all this stuff. So they can't. You have to, as an individual, understand something. As an individual, you got to shake loose from this stuff. That's the bottom line. If you're a trainer out there, you got to shake loose from this stuff. You don't. If you aren't willing to shake loose from it, like I can't help you. Okay, you got to help yourself.
It's going book. And that's where I also was talking a lot about clear communication and basically using signals. And again, what everybody knows as markers, verbal markers. That's when, then later on, of course, Learburg did the videos with Michael, and he was selling them much cheaper than anything else. So that's kind of what really popularized it. Same happened with understanding. First of all, forget about finding how to use negative punishment, but just understanding negative punishment.
So again, you talk about this whole thing about a negative, punishment. It's all about, again, talk about the four quadrants, right? It's trying to firm up an already bad idea. Okay, understand that's the bottom line here. It's trying to firm up an already a sideways going picture. Okay, this is the whole thing about how trainers are the picture they're building at a response level, getting dogs to respond, motivating responses that way. So you talk about, so it's like building off an already bad, an inherently corrupted concept. Core tenets flawed. That's something I talk about. It's the inescapable truth of all of it. So you see balanced dog trainers saying more, balanced dog training is more science based or building off of. You can't build off of a lie. Okay, you got to tear it down. And see, this is the problem here in the conversations. Like you have to understand the core tenet of this idea of what training is for the majority of trainers out there is inherently corrupt and flawed. That's it. That's the bottom line.
That was again like mid-90s when I was explaining how to do, and I mean it's in that book still. So it kind of goes really that far back when I'm.
And that's the thing too, because here's the thing: is you can be at, there's always a starting point. Like with when I get in training, I actually went by using treats. Okay, the four quadrants. I went through all that, and with my first police dog. But see, what happened at a certain point, I blew through that. Okay, blew through it in the sense of, okay, there's something else going on here that transcends all of that. Like there's you start getting to the relationship side. There's something else at work here that, because then you start looking at, okay, what's going on here? You start looking beyond what I call the blue line, the police line. You start looking at just the average like pet dog owner and see all the struggles are going on, and all this stuff happening. Look at the dog training world. Say there's something else going on here. That's superficial. Like that's just scratching the surface here. There's something not right. So of course, you start somewhere. That's where I start getting into is like, but then they're saying there's something inherently flawed here. There's something not right. You see all the dogs taking the hit. Say, is it really the dog's fault? Like there's a social aspect here. See, that's what gets your attention. That should get your attention. So then you have to go beyond that. You got to start asking some questions as an individual. And see, the problem here with a lot of trainers is they don't do that. They've already because understand, as soon as you identify as a balance trainer, a force free, whatever, drive based trainer, play based trainer, as soon as you identify, you've already signed the contract. Okay, you've already agreed to this is how I'm going to do it. Think about that. That's your identity, right? So when you get into then right, you get into this thing about say the information I'm putting out. It's going to be you're going to have a major problem on your hands because now you got to do what exactly? You got to rip those pages away and say, I'm willing to let the chips fall where they may. I'm willing to. I don't care. I'll make the trade off. See, and that's the problem with so many trainers. You've already signed the contract, and then you start. Of course, you can make money. You can be very popular based again on how the dog training world's set up. It's not a good thing at all. You have to understand that ethically and morally, it's not a good thing at all as an individual. See, this is the problem here in the dog training world.
Looking how, certain idea that I would have, and eventually the time frame that idea kind of becomes very just as normal as it can possibly be in the dog training circles. And so now I'm doing some really, really different cool things. But yeah.
So here he's got talking about doing some really different cool things, but what's the different cool things? Like that's the thing. I get into all that. Like so you can watch my other videos, but so I'll start part three here. And I'm gonna put some more parts here. I'm gonna start jumping ahead here a little bit. This is like a 4 hour video. So but again, I would really encourage anyone again looking for answers. Here's the thing, you can check out my website. I offer my training guides now. I made them free. Okay, you can get into Skinner and Pavlov. My mind and body connection guide's free. Beyond the leash is free. All of it's free because what I'm doing is I'm opening the system up. Okay, to anyone who's interested in finding answers. So my guides got lots of pictures, video links. So there's lots of free stuff, and so that's all there. Now, as a trainer, I offer that too. There's courses that you have to take prior to, but I encourage you if you're a balance and force-free trainer, you need to shake loose first. Shake loose from this ideology, shake loose from it, because you have to have a different way of thinking. Okay, you have to be open to a different idea of things, but I lay it all out. It's very clear. So the courses I have a couple online courses which sets you up for the actual dog trainer course. So but again, look at the state of dog training world. I mean, just take your time, go through it. That should be your default right there. I mean, before you even go in, you just ask yourself, why is it the way that it is? What's going on here? And you just keep dog trainers just spinning their wheels. So again, dog training guides are free. If you have questions, I have the FaceTime consult, which is like an hour consult through FaceTime or whatever your preferences for online help. And you can ask whatever questions you want. If you're stuck a certain way of thinking or whatever it is, that's an option. I have my members area option, which is like a lot of extra video content, a ton of it to go through too. So there's lots of information, lots of options available. But again, appreciate people watching. My goal is to kind of really fill in some gaps here as we go through. Not very far in 4 hours. We're not going to make it 4 hours, but I'll be jumping ahead a little bit, trying to get in some areas of this conversation to help kind of clarify some more issues as well. Thanks for watching.